Founded in 1908 in Yuma County, Arizona, Swansea was one of the many overpromoted and underproducing mining towns that emerged and vanished in the state during that time. Situated in a desolate and harsh region of west-central Arizona, 30 miles east of Parker along the Colorado River, Swansea was far from picturesque. Surrounded by barren, rocky ridges and hills, the town's highest point was Clara Peak, a stark volcanic cone standing 2,400 feet above sea level to the east. Originally named after the Clara Consolidated Gold and Copper Mining Company, which operated the signal mines and established the town, Swansea was previously known by various names, with Black Butte being the most common. The history of a mining community is not just about its minerals, but also about the men who sought wealth in the unyielding earth, extracting ore to the best of their abilities, and then moved on, whether or not they made a profit. Various mining individuals each contributed a part of the camp's story, starting with Richard Ryland, who found the Planet Mine deposit 10 miles northeast of the future Swansea location in 1862. While others were focused on gold and silver, Ryland's discovery yielded copper as high as 60%. In the initial year, he sent multiple tons of high-quality ore to Swansea, Wales, in the UK via San Francisco, benefiting from the discounted shipping rates provided by river steamboat companies. Ryland profited well at the time, earning $100 for each ton of high-grade copper ore. The news quickly spread, and with the promise of significant profits just around the corner, investors from San Francisco eagerly purchased all available claims, including the Planet Mine. They also constructed a smelter worth $100,000 at the Aubrey River Landing, now completely inundated by the waters of what is now modern-day Lake Havasu above Parker Dam. The peak of mining activity occurred in 1867, with the Springfield, Grand Central, and Planet Mines collectively producing nearly 1,200 tons of copper ore, ranging from 20% to 60% in purity. Approximately 500 miners from Mexico, China, and Anglo-America extracted the most valuable copper carbonates, establishing Bill Williams Fork as the most lucrative copper center in the western region. Also, the Planet Mines copper ores played a crucial role in supplying much-needed outbound freight for the Colorado riverboat steamers. However, prosperity was fleeting. In the latter part of 1867 and in the early months of 1868, the value of copper plummeted. Adding to the area's woes, Yavapai Indians launched raids in the region, stealing mules and attacking isolated prospectors. As a result of this double disaster, work came to a near standstill. Only the resilient and seasoned miners remained, with just a handful of claims continuing to yield results. Despite the challenges, the Planet Mine remained a point of interest. Fast forward 15 years to 1883, when Mathilda Mining Company from San Francisco set up a new water jacket furnace in an attempt to smelt planet ores. Following a year of unsuccessful endeavors, the Mathilda decided to abandon the project. In the meantime, exploration persisted on a smaller scale across the region. In 1874, Jackson McCracken stumbled upon the silver deposit known as the McCracken Lode, sparking a minor influx of people into the area. The extraction and processing of silver chlorides carried on until 1879, and the settlement of Signal, situated on a tributary of the Bill Williams River, 30 miles northeast of Planet, emerged as a hub for future prospectors entering the area. John W. Johnson emerged as a significant figure in the history of Swansea. As an experienced desert prospector, he spent countless years searching for valuable resources with little success and minimal companionship, except for his loyal burro. In early 1886, Johnson embarked on a prospecting expedition to the south, departing from Signal. It was during this venture that he, along with his partners John H. West and Patrick Halpin, stumbled upon silver-lead ore while chipping away at outcrops west of Black Butte, which would later become the site of Swansea. The familiar sequence of events unfolded rapidly, starting with the filling of a location notice for the ruby-silver claim on the newly established Black Butte mining district. However, their excitement was short-lived, as they soon discovered that the ruby-silver mine, like other copper mines, had only a shallow layer of valuable silver-lead ore over a much larger deposit of copper. Realizing the diminishing worth of their discovery, Johnson and his partners abandoned the seemingly worthless prospect. Nonetheless, a new era for copper was on the horizon. Demand for copper was already on the rise, and small isolated mining operations had transformed into profitable, large-scale enterprises. Undeveloped copper claims were being sold for substantial sums, as investors positioned themselves for the opportunity to capitalize on potential fortunes. After years of pursuing gold and silver, Johnson had a change of heart and became a believer in the potential of copper. Teaming up with two new partners, James Rosenborough and Henry Schlichter, he returned to the mineral-rich outcrops beneath Black Butte, now known as Clara Peak. On February 27th of 1896, they consolidated the Silver Ruby, along with several other claims under the name Copper Prince. Since all of the men hailed from Signal Camp, they collectively named their property the Signal Group. However, their moment of triumph was still a long way off, because over the next 9 years, their sole activity revolved around completing the annual assessment work on their claims, which deemed to be more burdensome than profitable. In 1904, a significant turning point occurred that altered the course of events. The Arizona and California Railroad, a subsidiary of the Santa Fe, commenced construction near Wickenburg, Arizona, to establish a westward line leading to a Colorado crossing at Parker. The railway tracks would pass 20 miles south of the Bill Williams Fork mines, which included the Signal Group. This news sparked a renewed frenzy among individuals, prompting them to flock to what the media referred to as the new copper country. Promoters, investors, and speculators swarmed in, and John Johnson, an experienced prospector who had never tasted success, found himself suddenly greeted by developers on his doorstep. Unable to resist the allure of substantial financial gain, Johnson and his partners made the decision to sell the Signal Group to Newton Evans, a zinc mine owner originally from Joplin, Missouri, but more recently residing in Los Angeles. The transaction amounted to $25,500, and with his portion of the proceeds, Johnson departed the area but later returned to his cabin near Swansea, assuming the role of a constant presence and frequently interviewed figure in the mining camp. Evans, in collaboration with other individuals from Southern California, established the Signal Copper Company and sought out a wealthy capitalist to invest in the venture. Meanwhile, progress was being made on the Arizona and California Railroad as it slowly advanced across the desert. By July of 1905, they had completed 50 miles to Salome, while more prospectors continued to search the surrounding hills. It was during this same month that Thomas Jefferson Kerrigan, a former railroad conductor turned prospector, successfully extracted a valuable mass of gold ore from his Clara claim, located 5 miles east of the Signal Group. The press referred to this discovery as the Kerrigan Strike, and samples taken from it were found to assay as high as $5,000 per ton. With the recent prosperous findings in Tonopah and Goldfield, Nevada, still fresh in their minds, optimists anticipated a similar mining boom in western Arizona. Miners from Prescott, who were currently idle, quickly made their way to the district, while mining men from Los Angeles held meetings at the Hole and Beck Hotel, which served as the city's Arizona headquarters, to discuss the potential of the region. Between 1905 and 1906, promoters took options on various claims, formed approximately 20 mining companies, and made a concerted effort to commence serious mining operations. Before long, journalists from local newspapers and mining publications sought out chatty prospectors to gather up the most up-to-date information on shaft depths and ore body sizes. The news of prospectors demanding increased representation in Yuma County politics also caused a minor stir during this time. Rumors of Yavapai County potentially annexing the Arizona and California Railroad even prompted a petition signing, but Yuma officials established new voting precincts, calming their northern neighbors. Visiting journalists described the region as teeming with a growing population, yet upon reaching Parker in the summer of 1907, they discovered that most mine developments in the area were merely surface scratches. One reporter echoed sentiments of promoters stating all that is required is adequate capital and effective management to propel the district quickly to the forefront. Newton Evans and T.J. Kerrigan, promoters of the Signal Company and Clara Gold and Copper Mining Company, attempted to secure investments without much success. Seeking a fresh approach outside their limited social circle at the Sierra Madre Club in Los Angeles, they discovered George Mitchell in late 1907. Mitchell, a metallurgist and Kerrigan's old acquaintance, was instrumental in establishing Swansea and eventually leading it to its future downfall. Raised in the renowned smelting capital of the world, the Mitchell brothers received a solid education in metallurgy and refining techniques from their uncle, who managed Vivian & Sons copper refiners. Upon arriving in the United States in the late 1880s, they joined Senator William A. Clark's vast copper enterprises in Jerome, Arizona, with Robert overseeing the reduction division and George serving as superintendent. While both brothers were competent, George's inventive nature shined through with his groundbreaking Mitchell economic hot blast furnace in the 1890s. Transitioning to a career as a speculator and developer, George partnered with promoter William Cornell Green in 1898 to develop the Cobre Grande mine and other claims in Cananea, Sonora, Mexico. Despite parting ways with Green in 1902, George had established himself as a successful entrepreneur with mining ventures in Guerrero and Sonora, Mexico, including the South Cananea Copper Company. Known for his ambitious plans and acquisitions, George Mitchell's business was shaped by his experiences with Green and his ventures in various locations, including Alaska. Kerrigan likely encountered Mitchell during the 1890s, when he worked as a conductor on the Santa Fe, Prescott, and Phoenix railroads. Mitchell served as a superintendent of the United Verde Copper Company smelter in Jerome, frequently traveled on this railroad. Since then, George has transitioned from being a subordinate to generating wealth in copper for individuals like William A. Clark. Alongside his brother, he utilized other people's money to finance various mining ventures in Mexico, which often resulted in him becoming wealthier while others suffered financial losses. In 1907, he achieved his most recent triumph by successfully extracting himself from the overhyped and underdeveloped Mitchell Mining Company of Mexico, securing over $200,000 of stockholders' funds. The news about his business tactics took a while to catch up with him, but his reputation as a successful smelter and wealth creator for others had already spread far and wide. When Kerrigan proposed tapping into the potential of the new copper country, he found him in between projects and willing to lend a hand. Thus, in the summer of 1908, Kerrigan, Newton, and Mitchell boarded the sweltering Arizona and California train to Baus, a makeshift town serving as the gateway to the mines. After a bumpy 21-mile journey on a buckboard wagon through the hills covered in creosote and mesquite flats, they arrived at the Clara prospect. Upon inspection, Mitchell determined that the Clara was merely a depleted site, with gold ore near the surface already extracted in 1907, and little chance of finding valuable minerals at greater depths. Following that, the group proceeded to follow the winding paths around Clara Peak towards Signal Camp. Mitchell's pace increased with anticipation. The weathered rock formations, blue copper carbonates at the entrance of the tunnel, and most significantly, the sulfides extracted and piled up near the mine dump, all led him to believe that there were promising opportunities for a much larger mine. With the eye of an engineer, he envisioned a smelter near a cluster of Paleo Verde trees, a railway running above the wash they had just passed through, towering headframes above the mine shaft, and a modern camp lining the ridges below. The potential new mining hub could possibly rival his hometown, where miners had transported planet copper ores in the 1860s. Upon his return to civilization, Mitchell informed Phoenix journalists that surveyors were already mapping out mining claims and planning the layout of Swansea, which was soon expected to become one of the most significant copper mining towns in the region. When George Mitchell assumed control of a project, he ensured that everything was executed on a grand scale. Just like the Cobre Grand and the Mitchell Mining Company, the operation was conducted on a massive scale. On May 8th of 1908, his lawyers established the Clara Consolidated Gold and Copper Mining Company, which exchanged stocks for the assets of the Clara, Moreau, Crown Princess, and Crown Queen mining companies. He purchased the Signal Group for $75,000, obtaining a total of 132 claims spanning 4,000 acres. The company had a capitalization of $3 million, with shares valued at $1 each. However, Mitchell and Father Alfred Quetu, who had previously resided in Prescott but now retired in Europe, sold shares in France for as much as $3.50 each. The foreign investors, led by Oscar Fagnon, a French banker from Lille, were swayed by the reports of extensive copper deposits and were impressed by the vast land holdings. They eagerly invested their savings in the Clara Consolidated Treasury. Mitchell required a substantial amount of capital to execute his ambitious plans. In order to refine his ore, he acquired his own furnace, which had been transported from Mexico to Globe and was eventually relocated to a location near the signal mines. He summoned his brother Robert and his acquaintance J.J. Williams, who traveled from Mexico to assemble the 350-ton capacity facility. Additionally, he enlisted the services of Harry Brown, another acquaintance from Mexico, to install hoists on 5 separate shafts. A pipeline spanning 3.5 miles and a pump were put in place to transport water from the Bill Williams River to the newly established town site. T.J. Kerrigan and his companions took on the task of surveying a railroad path from Baus on the Arizona and California lines. In the winter of 1908, progress was being made on these projects, but George envisioned something much greater. Instead of a 350-ton plant, he opted for a 700-ton capacity smelter, complete with converters, but this decision required additional funds. Furthermore, to complete the standard gauge railroad to the mines, even more financial resources would be necessary. Consequently, he embarked on a fundraising trip to France, a journey that would soon become a regular occurrence. During his stop in Paris, he came across a bullet and bomb-proof automobile that caught his attention. Equipped with 4 cigar lighters, a locomotive headlight, and luxurious features, he felt compelled to acquire it, especially after a car salesman, perhaps mistakenly believing him to be of royal descent, respectfully addressed him as Your Highness. The Clara Consolidated shareholders in France, Belgium, and Holland seemed equally impressed by his vehicle as they proceeded to purchase more stock and replenish the company's treasury. Apparently, appearances do matter when selling stock to foreign investors. Between 1909 and 1910, Swansea was bustling with activity. Upon his arrival in the spring of 1909, Haywood Short, a young carpenter, documented his observations of the town during its early development phase. Freight wagons, aided by a steam traction engine, transported supplies and lumber from the railroad as construction progressed. Haywood found employment at a rate of $3 for a 10 to 12-hour workday, contributing to the construction of company boarding houses, stores, and a warehouse. He noted that the job could have been easier if not for the interference of what was called at the time the foremen, descendants of French shareholders who had come to Arizona to engage in mining as a leisure activity instead of a serious pursuit. By the summer of 1909, a collection of wooden buildings and a post office had emerged near the mines, but the scorching summer heat and noticeable lack of amenities hindered the construction progress. Haywood had had enough and decided to leave the camp for good with his earnings. As the weather cooled and more funds arrived from France, construction activities resumed at a rapid pace. George Mitchell constructed an impressive 2-story building for himself, his wife Mary, and their children, serving as their residence, hotel, and office. Positioned on a nearby hill and surrounded by transplanted palm trees, the building stood in grand isolation, overlooking the mines, smelter, and the town. Company officials were accommodated in 6 spacious adobe houses with central breezeways, large porches, electricity, running water, and telephones. These houses were situated along a ridge close to the railroad depot. Beyond George Mitchell's residence, a business district emerged, featuring an electric plant, waterworks, a well-stocked company store, restaurants, barbershops, and assay offices. Saloons, cinemas, and various other establishments offered entertainment options for the workers were also present in the area. Angela Hammer, known as Arizona's Lady Editor, was the publisher of the short-lived Swansea Times. She found great excitement in running a newspaper in a mining camp, although, to one biographer, Angela fully immersed herself in every aspect of the business, from exploiting the mines to conducting interviews with prominent mining engineers and Eastern capitalists. She reported that Swansea had around 500 residents, mostly men, with the space for an additional 500. The unofficial mayor of the camp was Samuel G. Wilson, who held multiple roles as postmaster, insurance salesman, manager of the Signal Commercial Company, and intermediary between the company and the townspeople. As the camp's biggest supporter, he focused on highlighting the comforts and luxuries of Swansea, conveniently omitting any mention of the slums in the Mexican Quarter and the makeshift shelters where the Colorado River Indians lived. These dilapidated shelters housed the laborers who would endure the scorching heat of the mine's smelter. In December of 1909, Oscar Fanjul and several French stockholders visited the camp for a tour. Mitchell personally guided them through the buzzing and hissing, yet still unfinished smelting plant. Fanjul even descended shaft number 1 to see the reported 2.5 million ton ore body, which Mitchell suggested could be extracted more efficiently with new machinery. An automobile excursion was arranged to showcase the nearly completed railroad. It only required rails and a few more miles of grading to be ready for transporting the copper ore. After concluding the tour and presenting the progress made and the remaining tasks, Mitchell convinced the French investors to purchase more stock to finance the final construction. As a token of appreciation, Oscar Fanjul was elected as vice president of Clara Consolidated, replacing T.J. Kerrigan. Mitchell funneled $300,000 from the new Clara Consolidated funds into the Arizona and Swansea railroads, while still maintaining majority stock control. In 1909, territorial legislation granted the line a 10-year tax exemption. Ed Treadwell, son of Mitchell's friend Professor George Treadwell, oversaw the final work, and on February 23rd of 1910, the inaugural train transported George Mitchell and his family to Swansea. Along with various rail cars, the railroad company possessed 3 65-ton Baldwin locomotives and 20-ton ore cars. Mixed trains departed from the Adobe Swansea depot daily for Baus, aligning the shipping schedule with the mining activities of the area. Upon completion of the railroad, the final smelter machinery was delivered. An electric railway between the mine and the smelter began shuttling 5-ton ore cars to the ore bins. Then on May 2, 1910, Robert Mitchell ignited the fires and initiated the furnace operation while his brother observed. Following the first copper pour, George sent messages to Los Angeles and Europe, reporting a smooth operation with a production rate of 50 tons of ore per day. Upon his return to Los Angeles, George Mitchell gained recognition as a prominent figure in the mining industry. The Los Angeles Mining Review published a detailed article praising Mitchell's efforts in developing the Clara Consolidated, highlighting the challenges faced in the western region. The article concluded by stating that Mitchell's plant in Swansea ranked as the 5th top production center in the territory, trailing behind Douglas, Jerome, Globe, and Clifton Morenci. The initial refined copper was crafted into trinkets and shipped to Oscar Fagnow in France as gifts for himself and his shareholders. In July of 1910, Mitchell reported that the company had cash assets totaling nearly $103,000, along with accounts payable of nearly $87,000, which included $25,000 owed to him as the company president. Within just 21 months, Clara Consolidated had constructed reduction works, opened mines, and was now operating a railroad. Shareholders were excited and could anticipate dividends in the near future. In September, Howland Bancroft, a young geologist dispatched by the United States Geological Survey to compile a report on the district, visited Swansea. He examined the works, inspected the mines, and identified a significant body of 4.5% copper sulfide. The large smelter left a strong impression on him. However, he found the mine equipment, small gasoline and steam-powered hoists, and workings, ranging from 200 to 500 feet deep, lacking. Bancroft concluded that too much money had been spent on constructing a reduction plant rather than on developing the mines, and the Swansea smelter either remained inactive or operated at only half capacity. Throughout the autumn, a hastily project to install larger hoists over shaft number 1 and number 5, as well as the use of churn drills that uncovered the new ore lenses, depleted the company's funds. Additionally, Mitchell, a renowned inventor, experimented with new yet flawed machinery, resulting in significant expenses for Clara Consolidated. The Mitchell smelter quickly gained a reputation for consuming coke, but not effectively reducing sulfur dioxide ore. Copper was being produced at a cost of over 15 cents per pound, while market prices stood at 12 cents, resulting in a loss of 3 cents for every pound produced. By this point, Mitchell and Clara Consolidated were rapidly declining. Efforts to divert the attention of concerned shareholders, including receiving awards at the Brussels Exposition for a smelter model and ore exhibits, published lengthy, positive articles in mining publications, and making personal trips to Europe. However, the lack of productivity, frequent machinery malfunctions, and claims of ore discoveries without actual production shattered the illusion. In 1911, Harvey Weed criticized Clara Consolidated operations in his mine's handbook, denouncing the company's stock-selling practices, control over workers, and insufficient ore reserves to sustain the smelter at even half its capacity for an extended period of time. 2 years later, Weed described Mitchell's Swansea venture as a case study of unchecked enthusiasm, irresponsible stock sales, and premature construction of surface facilities before securing enough ore to keep them operational. Despite sporadic operations, the treasury eventually ran dry. In the summer of 1911, Mitchell traveled back to France in an attempt to convince investors to invest more in expanding the smelter. However, Oscar Fanjou and William Shute, an Amsterdam banker, had different intentions and proposed a buyout. As negotiations unfolded, miners who had not been paid for a month placed a lien on Clara Consolidated and sought bankruptcy. During the bankruptcy proceedings, the company's financial records revealed by the Secretary-Treasurer E.D. Elson disclosing a debt of $712,000, shocking French investors who had already invested nearly $2 million in the Clara. Miners in Swansea were given $25, $50 for married men, and transportation to Baus. Consequently, the operation came to a complete standstill. After dispatching French engineers to verify the potential ore reserves, the Shute brothers and Fanjou formed a syndicate to revive the Clara mine. They established the Swansea Consolidated Gold and Copper Mining Company, which had a capital of 4 million shares, valued at $1 per share. Swansea Consolidated exchanged all of its Clara Consolidated stock for 500,000 shares of its own stock. The Fanjou Shute Syndicate sold 2 million shares of Swansea Consolidated for $280,000, a sum that would settle immediate debts and wage claims and provide enough funds to resume mining operations. George Mitchell opposed the syndicate, hoping to secure capital from other sources or attract the interest of Phelps Dodge, William A. Clark of the United Viridae, or the owners of the Humboldt smelter, but his efforts were unsuccessful. By June, the French syndicate had already taken control, appointed Camille Clerc, an engineer from Paris, to oversee the operations and breathe new life into Swansea. However, George Mitchell was not completely out of the picture. He maintained control of the Arizona and Swansea Railroad and initiated legal proceedings against Clara Consolidated, seeking $100,000 in unpaid wages and personal loans. The lawsuit remained unresolved, and Mitchell's influence gradually diminished. In 1916, Mitchell's old acquaintances from Jerome hired him as the general manager of the speculative Jerome Superior Copper Company. Unfortunately, by 1920, this venture also went bankrupt, leading to allegations of mismanagement by stockholders. George Mitchell spent his final days in his Los Angeles home, with his failures over the past 2 decades leaving him financially ruined. Regrettably, Swansea Consolidated followed in the footsteps of Clara Consolidated by expanding the smelter's capacity and accumulating debt. However, a surge in copper prices to 16 cents per pound in 1912 proved to be beneficial during the 1912-1913 tenure of the general manager Camille Clerc. The mines produced approximately 1 million pounds of copper, valued at around $150,000. Miners and their families returned to Swansea, causing the population to grow to 1,000. The workforce consisted of Mexican miners and laborers, Southern Europeans referred to as new immigrants, Indians, Chinese, and Anglo-Americans. The Parker Post published Swansea-related information, including a detailed article on the new equipment and operations implemented by General Manager Clerc. Among the new installations was a $60,000 reverberatory furnace, increasing the smelter capacity to 1,000 tons. Superintendent Hughes successfully tapped into the ore body below shaft number 5, utilizing a new slicing and caving system to efficiently extract the 3.5% copper sulfide. Copper prices remained high until early 1913, when they plummeted to 13 cents per pound by the end of the year. By March of 1913, profits turned into deficits, bills went unpaid, and Swansea Consolidated, like its predecessor, faced bankruptcy. In November, Oscar M. Suden, the president of the United States National Bank in Los Angeles, was appointed receiver by the court. The company's situation became more complex with the outbreak of World War I, as communication with absentee owners was cut off and many individual stockholders, including Oscar Fanyo, perished. The fate of the Swansea Consolidated now rests in the hands of Oscar Suden. Recognizing the potential damage that idle mine equipment could incur due to corrosion and deterioration, Suden devised a plan to lease out Swansea mines despite their low-grade copper content. In late 1904, he entered into a 2-year lease agreement with Judge W.J. Thomas of Los Angeles. Unfortunately, shortly after commencing operations, Judge Thomas passed away from a heart attack. However, Superintendent Ernest C. Lane, a seasoned Nevadian with extensive experience in the area since 1906, managed to keep the mines operational with limited resources. He assured the miners that they would receive wages once the ore they extracted was sold to the Humboldt smelter. Having previously served as a foreman under George Mitchell's leadership, Lane possessed the knowledge to effectively direct his 50-man workforce. By the time the lease expired on October 23, 1916, Lane had successfully mined copper worth nearly $1 million. Impressed by Lane's accomplishments, Suden decided to retain him as the head of operations at Swansea. Within 4 months, Lane managed to ship an additional $215,000 worth of copper. Furthermore, he identified a substantial ore deposit to the north of shaft number 5. Lane proposed that Suden invest $50,000 to sink another working shaft, but the cautious banker hesitated to allocate funds to a property well known for absorbing investments. Instead, Suden opted to solicit bids for a new lease. To his surprise and satisfaction, several groups, including the Guggenheims of American Smelting and Refining Company, Professor James Douglas of Phelps Dodge, and Senator William A. Clark of the United Verde, offered between $1.5 million and $5 million for the lease. The high demand for copper during World War I, which led to increased copper prices, prompted these substantial bids. Suden ultimately granted a 10-year lease to Senator Clark in exchange for $5 million to be paid from the profits. The agreement also included the installation of a new 1,000-foot shaft, known as Number 7, and the settlement of all outstanding debts owed by Swansea Consolidated. In April, formation of Swansea Lease Incorporated facilitated the transition of operations, with Charles Clark, Senator Clark's son, assuming management and control. Wisely, Charles retained Ernest Lane as the superintendent. Between 1917 and 1919, Lane successfully shipped 300 to 400 tons of ore daily to the smelters in Humboldt, Clarkdale, and Sasko. The years during World War I in Swansea presented a stark contrast to the era of George Mitchell's management. While the company provided essential facilities such as hospitals, schools, boarding houses, and commissaries for the workers and their families, there was a lack of recreational outlets due to Arizona's state prohibition law, which came into effect on January 1, 1915. Occasionally, Deputy Sheriff W.C. Despain would apprehend newcomers whose tall boots hinted at their illicit activities. During this time, bootleggers could sell inexpensive whiskey for $5 per bottle as long as they evaded capture. Another notable difference was the establishment of a Swansea local chapter of the Western Federation of Miners. In June 1907, during one of Charles Clark's mine inspections, a group of miners approached the son of the millionaire and demanded the Miami wage scale. Charles promptly agreed to raise wages from $3.50 to $5.40 per day. Shortly after the strike, organizers from the Industrial Workers of the World union arrived in Swansea and made additional demands. They communicated to Superintendent Lane their desire for a new cook and more ice water. Lane's response was straightforward. All miners were terminated, and a special train was ready to transport them to Baus. A fresh workforce was hired, and mining operations resumed. Following the conclusion of the war, the decline in copper prices posed a challenge to Swansea's profitability. In an effort to sustain the town, Charles implemented new reduction work. A concentrator with a capacity of 200 tons was constructed in 1918, and a flotation plant was completed in September of 1919. Although the concentrator should have been built years earlier, it managed to reduce production costs to 12 to 13 cents per pound. However, the price of copper fell below this threshold in 1920, and Charles grew weary of managing the Swansea lease and sold his majority stock interest to mining engineer George M. Calvo and the Consolidated Arizona Smelting Company of Humboldt. Following the national financial panic of 1921 and the slight increase in copper prices in 1922, Calvo recruited around 300 Mexican miners to transport 7,000 to 8,000 tons of ore monthly to the Humboldt smelter. The flotation mill was also put back into operation, yielding copper nearly 98% pure. By the beginning of 1924, Calvo had extracted and processed approximately 200,000 tons of ore valued at $2 million in copper. When negotiations for a new lease began in mid-1923, Souten and the remaining French stockholders terminated discussions, intending to operate the mine themselves. In the final 6 months of operation, Calvo depleted the mine's resources, resulting in 1923 being the most productive year at Swansea, and nearly the final one. Ernest C. Lane made multiple attempts to reopen the old Swansea site from 1926 until his death in 1943. In 1929, the American Smelting and Refining Company obtained a lease on the property and undertook significant reconstruction efforts, including the camp, office, and concentrator. Unfortunately, the Great Depression struck, leading to the closure of operations. In 1937, the employees, unable to revive the mine, departed, taking much of the machinery and the railroad with them. Today, only remnants of Swansea can be found, while nearby newly constructed roads serve as a testing ground for drill holes, indicating that modern miners are exploring for the hidden copper ore beneath the shadow of Clara Peak.